Oh, I'm so excited today. Welcome to the podcast. We're chatting with Brett Sams from the Self Care Zone. And Brett is a bloke who walks the talk. And I'm so glad that you and I are chatting today. Brett, what is the quirkiest question I could ask you today that would get an honest answer?
What's your backstory?
All right. Brett, what's your backstory, mate?
25 years next week, I watched my brother get run over by a school bus. I was 10 feet from him and really blamed myself for it. Had a lot of help from church pastors, school counselors, the blokes across the road in the car yard that knew me and my brother really well. And I figured the only way I can say thanks to those who helped me is to pay it forward and help other people through their journeys through life as well.
Wow. Okay. So, what would be the next logical question I'd ask you? Because I could ask 100 questions here. What would be a good question I would ask you? You've just told us you saw your brother go down by a car and that a lot of people helped you afterwards. What would be a good question I'd ask you?
I don't know. Maybe do you drive?
Yeah, all right. How about how does a young bloke recover from that and now do you drive?
I love driving, actually. Driving for me is self-care, and as is for a lot of blokes. You're in total control of what's going on, the music, the speed you're going, everything is in your total control. And for a lot of people, it's the only time that they're in total control of their life. So I love driving, and that's how I got into the self-development stuff, was driving 2 hours each way to and from work, 5 days a week. Fuck on a podcast, audio book, and learn as you drive.
That's amazing. Okay. That makes so much sense. Well, one, I'm glad you're driving now. But two, it's like you said 25 years almost to the day that you lost your brother. And now
Yeah.
the work that you do is expanding in a big way. But it comes down to something really was tough there. And you said people helped you out. Who are the people who helped you out? How did they help you out?
Yeah, that we had a few councils as part of the church that I grew up in. I grew up as part of the Adventist church, and about 3 months later, I was away on a school camp, and the fiance of one of the young teachers was with us. And he spent the entire weekend with me, and at the time, I was having thoughts of suicide because I was with my brother at the time. I could see what was going to happen, but I didn't do anything about it. Um, and it was only through spending time with this guy that he showed me that no matter what I did, either way, my brother or I would have died. Nothing could have stopped both of us from surviving. And that from then on, those thoughts stopped. And it wasn't so much, logic or, getting stuff out of books. It was real world. This is, showing me what would have happened if I tried to grab my brother that would have propelled me further closer to the bus. It's strategies, I guess, like real world hands-on strategies that day that helps me move through those thoughts.
Wow, just being practical. Here's a bloke with
Yeah.
stuff all training just going, oh, let me sit in your lob for a minute. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
All right. And then longer term, how does a guy come to terms with that once he's had that initial support? And I don't know if you've noticed, Brett, but it seems to me like whenever someone gives support, that's great. And then 6 months, everyone's just assuming you're completely fine. And that's not the real world. So how did you go, say, 6 months later, a year and a half?
The first 4 months was hard. Because it was a school bus. So I had to catch the bus to school every day. I said I couldn't get on a bus for the first 6 months, which was hard because, I was one of four boys. My two older brothers had left school and we only had one car. School was 7.5 k's away. So I was riding a bike to school. Um, yeah, I just figured, at the closer you get to coming out the other side or working through that time is life goes on. You've learnt, for me, it was a massive learning experience of just how much I could get through. So, what can I do to help others that are just coming into this phase of life that need the immediate help? What can I do now to help them move through their period?
Yeah, got that. And you work with a lot of, say, directors or leaders within NDIS. What is it you do that helps people?
So what I do is I focus on looking after yourself or your staff at work. Work's quite a stressful environment, whether that's, timelines that you've got to meet a deadline. It's the mounting pressures of work. It's, for some people, pressures of family that flow into the work environment. Years ago we had this thing where work life and home life had to be separate, but that's bull. It's, the pressure is always there. So how can we help that transition between the two environments? Yes, you've got the stresses in home, but they don't necessarily need to compound the stresses of work, and vice versa. So how can we look after the mental health of the staff to help that transition back to home, to reduce that stress of work so that they can do a better quality job rather than quantity?
Yeah, that makes sense. And so they can still be working with you in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So there's an economic imperative there that replacing a staff member, basically, most organisations will cost between 10 and 20 grand in lost staff time for training.
If not more.
Yep.
There was a thing put out last year by the Australian Mental Health Union. It said that on average, if you have someone on stress leave, by the time you pay their wages, their replacements' wages, you're looking at about $65,000. How many businesses can afford a $65,000 deficit? Where if we're looking after our staff better, you're then reducing the stress they're put on people, reducing the risk of them going on stress leave, therefore reducing your costs.
Yeah, and your workers' comp and premiums and all that stuff. That
Yeah.
makes sense. And it's like whether you just lost a support worker fairly cheap to replace in reality, whereas you lost your two IC and your whole business is just going to need you to step back in for 6 months.
Yeah.
But
Or more.
yeah, the cost is huge. The thing is, though, I think for a lot of people, they're like, if they knew something, there was a measurable outcome, they'd do it. But because in the real world, this sort of stuff's not measurable outcomes. There's just have a crack, do your best, and hope that you planting those seeds pays off later. Like, what do you say to people when they're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that because I don't see the outcome?
They may not see the measurable outcome, but there's I've made up a return on investment calculator that basically says for every dollar you invest into your staff, you get $11 return.
Well, how
So,
does that work?
well, it's doing training around mental health. It's, when people think of staff development, they think, oh, we'll just get some pizzas and just hang around. But that's not staff development. That's not building culture. That's just giving people a free lunch. By making cultural changes from the top down, it's, making sure that conversations from the CEO all the way down are around self-care. It's, having a conversation with how did you switch off over the weekend? Those are the changes that shift the culture to reduce that cost.
That makes
I used to work.
sense.
I used to work for behavior support service, and there we do monthly supervision as a behavior support practitioner, and so I've been doing this for about 5.5 years now. And in that time, only one company has mentioned the word self-care as part of supervision. But behavior support practitioners and other practitioners in the NDIS space are burning out. You've got, some organizations that have 6.5 hours a day of billable KPIs, but that's not sustainable. So, how can we include self-care to reduce the stress so that you can get those KPIs, or can we reduce the KPIs by still, I don't know, that there's a way around this that we can still meet the billables, but also still look after your staff so that your company flourishes and moves forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then in terms of self-care, does it look different between generations? I mean, I'm in my mid-40s. I'm guessing I probably do things a bit different to if I was 19. What do you see working well for people at different ages?
It's not just the ages though, it's phases of life. So, a young person might be spending time more with their friends because they may not have, great relationships with their families, or they may not have a partner. So it's that socialization of spending time with your friends where with, because I've got two young kids, it's doing things with the family. It's taking them out to go to the park or whatever on the weekends. It's, being a parent and not having to think about the stuff at work where, you know, like I saw a psychologist, I can't remember her name. She was really good talking about how she used to see self-care as going to get your nails done or going and get your hair done, and then having to schedule your day around those appointments. But having to schedule around those appointments actually created more stress than what the appointments were relieving. And by getting someone else to do it, it's not actually self-care, it's others' care. So you're getting other people to care for you. So now she goes, no, no hair, no nails, nothing's done. She's just taking that time for herself to sit and listen to some music. It's spend time outside, 5 minutes in the sun. It's go and make a cup of tea and, do something that you enjoy. Maybe it's run yourself a bath rather than go to the spa. There's different things you can do both personally and professionally. But obviously you can't go and have a spa day at work. But you shouldn't. But what can you do at work? I had a comment on LinkedIn a while ago asking, what can we do at work? How about every month you put up a poster on the wall? These are the wins for the month. Celebrate those wins. Someone gives good feedback, put it on the wall. Someone goes on holidays and brings back a picture, put it on the wall. At the end of the month, you take a photo and celebrate that month and then start again.
Yeah, that makes heaps of sense. That makes so much sense. And then I guess if you're, say, a leader, say you're managing director or you're, GM, or like you're up the top, it's so easy to talk about self-care. But the reality is, say you're the leader and your 2IC takes a week off because she's crook. Well, guess what sort of week you're going to have. So it's hard for people to be like, yeah, you look after yourself, when they're like, sure, and I'll put in a 65-hour week, no worries. Like, how do leaders do this practically without becoming a doormat? Because I think that's the fear.
Yeah, I think there's ways around it. Like there's, maybe not rely on one person. Maybe have multiple people that you can delegate to. You have the ultimate say, but Simon Sinek has this great thing of, if you have a problem, come to me with 3 potential ideas and we'll work through them. Chances are the people that come to you with the idea have the solution and they've come to that solution themselves. So why not just go with what they've suggested? And it's not 3 solutions. They've go and research what the 3 potential outcomes are. What are negatives that could come with this decision? And then as they're working through it and doing the research, they'll come to the right decision. And if you say, which one would you go with? They're going to go, well, I think it's going to be this one and here's why. Well, you've delegated, you've taken load off your mind, and that's going to help you work through those 65-hour days and reduce that load.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see you describing a culture where there's integrity, there's honesty, there's truth, people bringing dramas and solutions and feeling like they'll be heard, where it's not an environment where you're just exhausted by being there. I get what you're saying. And then another elephant in the room that directors are always talking about when they're talking about self-care is, what about the 22-year-old who falls apart every time someone gives her feedback that's only 99% positive? How do you build resilience when you've got, you just see this go wrong so many times in culture where it's like suddenly we're just not speaking truth because we're all being nice? How do you put self-care into that in a way that works?
I think part of it too is that 22-year-old receiving positive feedback, or are they just receiving the negative? Too often we're just receiving the negative feedback and we don't actually see the positives of what we're doing. Where, if you feed back the positive on a regular basis, they're just their self-esteem is going to keep climbing, and that negative will still have a bit of a down, but not as big. It's going to be, I've seen how much I can do. I've seen the impact that I'm having. Okay, I could have done something differently, but then put it back onto them and say, how do you think you could improve this? Get them to logically work through the solution to a problem, and then having them work through that, that's going to boost their self-esteem as well.
Yeah, that makes heaps of sense. And I get
But then also too, it's, you know, instead of having this conversation in the work environment, let's go and change the environment where you're having the conversation. Could it be, let's go grab a coffee together? That's more of a relaxed environment. I think many businesses have this sterile work environment that is set up to remove emotions. So when someone does display their emotions, it's like they should be frowned upon or shunned. Where if we're changing the environment, we're potentially changing the outcome of that situation as well.
yeah, and you're treating people like people.
Yeah.
It's like if you and I were mates and we always hung out, say every Friday afternoon, we're not going to hang out in a sterile office. We're going to go hang out somewhere fun.
Yeah.
You know, and the more you talk, the more intelligent you sound, because I'm like, Brett's living this out. I'm like, I get this. And you're also looking at the people behind it. The problem comes when leaders have got a finite budget and a very thin NDIS style margin of profit, that self-care becomes an expense instead of something that keeps you going.
Yeah.
Because that short-term thinking, like how do we as leaders deal with that?
It comes back to the old adage, you've got to spend money to make money. Yes, you've got a small margin, but with that small margin, can you use a portion of it to bring some self-care training in for the managers? Start there and build from there. Can they then flow down what they've learned to their staff? Can you, I don't know, have a group of staff come in for a dinner that, builds the culture of the company? That's going to have a bigger impact than just keeping all the money for the company.
Yeah, here. Okay. And what happens when all this talk about self-care meets a culture that's actually broken, that's not being dealt with? What happens then?
I think the biggest thing is recognizing culture's broken. And then, just the team needs to change. It might be a leader of the team. It maybe not the CEO, but the 2IC or, the team leader. Can that change and have a new perspective come in? Does that then shift the culture?
I get that. What are some examples you've seen of leaders looking after the self-care of, say, the people in the lower or middle levels of their organization that have paid off massively, that did go right? And then what are some examples you've seen of attempts to solve things that have actually backfired? Because that's another fear people have. Like, what's good look like? What's, stuff it, that didn't quite work out to plan look like?
I think one situation I had this year was had an electrician reach out to me through LinkedIn, and he said, "Hey, can you come in and do some self-care training for my staff?" Absolutely, let's do it. This is someone who, is not in the caring industry. He's an electrician. That's his company. And in speaking to him, he said to me that he went through mental health challenges himself, and he can see in his staff that some of them are struggling as well. Some of them have a mental health care plan. Some of them are on medication. He just wants to look after his staff. Just he can see the benefit of, looking after them, building the company culture and building the team. So he brought me in to do a 2-hour self-care talk in the toolbox meeting. And I'm going back in 2 months' time to do it again because he can see the benefit in it. And, as you'd expect in a group of 15 blokes, they all sat there with their arms folded and closed off body language. But then some of the younger blokes started to talk up. And you could see a couple of them start to relax a bit. They unfolded their arms and just had more open body language. This is the company culture we want to change. And this is the positive culture we want to see. It's, are they now talking about their self-care and their mental health more? Is it, it's not measurable, but you can see it, if that makes sense. And like a needy one is, like there's one company I worked for years ago as a support worker that I Easter weekend, I can't remember what it was, working with a young bloke, 2-to-1 staff, and he was starting to escalate in his behaviours. The behaviour support plan said we could help maneuver him down to a calming temp that we had set up. And I stood behind him with my hands on his back to try and suggest he move that way. And he drops to the floor. I tripped over his leg and dislocated my knee and small ligaments in my knee. I had bruising back up for either side of my knee. I rang on call and they abused me for calling on call. I had to call my own ambulance. I then had to wait until they got someone to come and relieve me because we couldn't leave him with one star. But I got abused for making someone do their job when I actually needed it. And the person I spoke to was an ex-support worker. She should know better. But it's gone too far. Like, you need to change that company culture from the middle, rip everything out and start again. Now, I've got mates that work for this company still, and nothing's changed.
That makes sense. I hear you. And the thing is, that's a pretty extreme example of a culture that's just not geared up to accept that people are people.
Yeah.
And then what about in your life, Brett? Like, you're a leader of an organization. You got to watch your own mental health. You got to watch your own ability to keep turning up and to have a positive attitude when you do. What's it look like for you? What is, and not even using the word self-care, but what does a healthy way of doing life look like for you?
For me, it's time blocking my calendar. I've got an alarm that goes off at 8 o'clock every night. Here's a reminder to go to the gym. I don't always go, but it's just that reminder of if you squeeze time in to go to the gym, you're going to feel better tomorrow. You're going to sleep better tonight. The following few months are going to have that positive impact. My day starts at 7 a.m. and goes until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night because I've got multiple jobs. I have to balance multiple things. So it's my daughters do dancing, so it's blocking out time where I can take my daughters to go do dancing. It's scheduling family time into the day and making sure that during that time, that's what you're doing. You've got the laptop closed, your phone's on, let's have a different room. Let's just focus on spending the time you've got allocated for that role.
I get that. That makes sense. All right. And what would you give yourself out of 10 for your self-care in the last, say, month? How do you go? Like, everyone talks the talk, right? But you obviously, what pays off, what doesn't, a million strategies. How would you rate yourself if you were an external person?
I'd probably say, at the moment, I'd say a 6. If we went back to the June long weekend 2021, I'd say a -6. I was up Northern New South Wales for a family member's funeral. Massive work stress. My youngest daughter was about 14 months old. She's got a disability and she spent the first 8 weeks in hospital. We just brought her into casino and she vomited in the car. The first time she vomited. Put in the Macca's, cleaned her up, got her back in the car, and just leaving casino, she vomits again. I'm going, okay, something's not right. She gets sick in winter all the time. And it's uncool. Just leaving casino, she vomits again. We've gone, okay, we're only 10 minutes away. We'll just head to the house, clean her up again. That was fine. Get to the house, funeral Saturday, 4 a.m. Sunday morning, she's having trouble breathing. So we get up, drive into Kyogle, which, if you know the area, is a community hospital. They're dedicated. Really nothing we can do here. We'll call an ambulance and ship her off to Lismore, which is the base hospital. They'll be able to do more for her there than what we can. So they call an ambulance. She races off to Lismore, and I head back to the house. 9 o'clock, I wake up and talk to the family that I'm staying with and said, look, why don't we pack up today and head back to Newcastle today, knowing that my youngest daughter's going to be flying back to Newcastle. So we're running around their house. I remember walking from the bedroom we were staying into the kitchen and reaching over the sink to grab the baby bottles, and that's stuff. I woke up on the floor having had a seizure. The only one in the house who knew what to do was me, but the family I was with called an ambulance and they, looked after me. The same ambos that drove my daughter to Lismore picked me up and drove me to Kyoto Hospital. And they put it down to stress. I knew what to do. I just missed doing it. And from there, that's where the self-care zone came from. It's teaching others to look after themselves so that doesn't happen to them.
Well, that makes sense, mate. I hear that you have a high level of commitment to people looking after themselves because you don't want them lying on the floor of their kitchen because it just got too much. Looking back, what would you have tweaked in the weeks leading up to that so that that could have potentially been avoided?
Making time for myself, trying to reduce work stress as much as I could. I don't know. And that's the thing, like I knew what to do, I just wasn't doing it. But to look back now and go, what would you have changed different? I don't know.
I hear. It's like we can't afford for our emotional tank to get down to 10% because then it's too easy for it to get down to 0.
Yeah.
It's like we win the game when it's at 50% and we start doing something about it. When it's at 30%, we start treating it like it's at 0%.
Yeah.
Because all you need is some unanticipated event to just make life that bit too hard. I think what you're doing is fantastic, Brett. I just think you're kicking butt. I just think that people are grateful for you. I came across you on LinkedIn, which is, not that surprising really, given how much time you and I spend on LinkedIn. But I just think what you're doing is great. And I love your posts all about just common sense stuff.
Well,
it scares me that plenty of people in my shoes are not going to listen because the priority of work is ever pressing. The priority of, if I don't get my marketing right this month, then will I have work next month? The priority of, if I don't pass my audit this month, will I have work in 6 months? It's very easy to talk about self-care. It's very hard to do it. For you, you've had your event that tells you it's worth doing. What would be your message to the person who's sitting there, an emotional tank on about 25%? It's been there for 2 years. What now?
Look at what finds you joy. What is it that you can find joy in? Is it sitting by some water for 5 minutes, dip your toes in the water and just listen to the sounds of the water? Is it a 5-minute walk around the block? A 5-minute walk can have a massive impact on your mental health. But I'll get to that when I've got time. Now's the time. You haven't got time. This is it. Go and do that thing that helps you find joy in the day. People say that coffee is not self-care because it, increases your heart rate and it's a diuretic and dehydrates you. For me, I brew my own coffee. I grind my own beans. So for me, it's the 5 minutes while the kettle boils. What can I do? Some breath exercises. I can do 20 squats. I can do some push-ups. I'm not having to take time out of my day. I've already got the time there that I'm standing there in the kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil. What can I add into that 5 minutes to improve my day? It's these little micro things we need to add into our day that are going to add up to a big impact over a month, over the year.
Mate, that makes so much sense. Here's a question, and feel free to not answer it or feel free to answer it, right? Your brother who you loved, if he was hanging out in this studio today with you and I, what do you think would be his perception of how you're doing, and are you spending your life the way that you'd be proud of, that sort of stuff? Like, what do you think he'd say to you?
Given his personality, I'd think he would be helping me along the way. He was only 10 when he died. But he was the type of person who would cross the road to help somebody cross the road. If he could see an old lady cross the road that needed help, he'd jump off his bike and hop across the road. Where, 99% of kids at that age, head down, keep going, do what I'm doing. They wouldn't care about anything else. Where he was that type of person who would help someone else. So I think part of what I'm doing too is, building on his personality and helping other people as well. So I think he'd be proud of me of what I'm doing, and also give the review with him and help him build it.
I think this is just remarkably helpful. Well, I love it. Brett, if someone wants to get in touch with you just because they're having a hard day, or if they want to get in touch with you because their organisation needs it, what are the best ways to find you?
So you can find me on theselfcarezone.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as Brett Sams, or you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as The Self Care Zone.
Yeah. And if anyone has trouble finding him, look up Michael Clark on LinkedIn or look up Athletic Koala. Find me there and I'll put you in touch with Brett and he'll be happy to have a chat. Brett, thanks for your time today, mate. I reckon this is much needed and I just wish we had another 100 of you, but one's a good start. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being real.
Thank you.